Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Emma Galdo. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing here at Bloomfire, and I will be your host for today's session. To set the stage for our discussion, if you've ever waited days for someone on your team to get back to you with a document that you emailed them about, or if you've looked up from your computer and realized you spent the last hour hunting down information across 5 different platforms, you are not alone. This is a pervasive issue in today's work environment, and the cost of that inefficiency can truly be staggering for the organization. Today, we'll be talking about that financial impact of poor knowledge management practices or knowledge mismanagement, and more importantly, how the new approach of enterprise intelligence is really helping companies make better decisions faster. To explore this topic today, I'm joined by 2 fantastic leaders with decades of experience in this realm. First, it is an absolute pleasure to introduce Philip Brittan, Bloomfire's new CEO. Philip comes to us with years of experience as a product and engineering leader at Google Workspace, Bloomberg, Thomson Reuters. So he's bringing a fresh vision to the future of knowledge. And we have Dan Stradtman. Dan is Bloomfire's Chief Marketing Officer, and he is a longtime evangelist for the power of better information flow at Fortune 500 companies and enterprises. Before I pass it over to them to dig in, just a few quick housekeeping items. Please note that we'll save time for audience questions at the end of the session, but drop anything that's coming up for you into the Q&A box as we go, so we have it for that Q&A at the end. And in the event portal, you should see a PDF that is available for you to download. It's Bloomfire's Value of Enterprise Intelligence Report for 2025. And this report breaks down the impact and financial value of effective knowledge management practices. It's based on data from 10,000 professionals across 115 companies. We will be referencing the report in today's discussion, but I highly encourage you to download it for future use, for future reference in your work, because it is just absolutely packed with fantastic data. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Dan to kick off today's discussion.
Emma, thank you so much. And to all those joining today, thank you for spending a little bit of time with us and this discussion. Philip, welcome. Just so pleased to have you as our CEO. Your experience is already proving to be so valuable as we navigate into this next phase of our growth. Maybe starting off, you spent your career thinking about how people collaborate, how they share knowledge. Obviously, the stops Emma mentioned: Google, Bloomberg, now Bloomfire. Maybe what drew you into this role, and why is knowledge flow a priority in your view?
So likewise, thanks very much. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Emma, for the introduction. And obviously, thanks to all of you for joining us today. It is my supreme pleasure to be here. I've started a bunch of companies. As you say, I've worked at a number of larger companies, including Google twice. And, I've led businesses, my own companies, and units within larger companies, large product development efforts, et cetera. And what I've seen consistently across all of those is that the flow of information, of actionable knowledge, is absolutely critical, no matter what you do. And if it's siloed, if it's fragmented, if people are having to guess or make decisions based on incomplete or inefficient flow of knowledge, it really hurts things. And collaboration is critical, and people communicating with each other is necessary, but it is not, at the surface level, not sufficient. And it certainly isn't just meetings, although meetings can be very productive. And it isn't just emails and sharing documents, writing something together. It's really about having a collective set of understanding that the entire organization can operate on top of and be able to have that shared knowledge base on which to operate. And being able to find the answers to things really quickly, and efficiently, and not spend a lot of time hunting around for it. So I've seen all that, lived it, the good, the bad, the ugly. And when I had the opportunity to join Bloomfire, first as a board member and more recently now as the CEO, the mission really hit home for me. I could understand really deeply firsthand how valuable it is to organize, clean, and make actionable a company's knowledge. And so it's, and that's how businesses, organizations, teams, efforts of any kind really thrive. It's really critical. But the challenge is massive. We'll talk a little bit about some of the specifics here. Most companies don't get this right and really struggle for it. And many of them don't really fully understand the nature or the magnitude of the challenges they're facing on this front.
No, I think you're hitting it on the head. Maybe we lean into some of the challenges and opportunities. As you well know, we just published a report kind of getting deeper into that, where we looked over the last 6 months or so, surveying over 10,000 of our user base, right? And we're very lucky to be able to count 15 out of the Fortune 100 companies, 40 out of Fortune 500 companies among our customers. And part of that survey was to understand how they value knowledge, right? How they appreciate kind of that knowledge in terms of driving business process, driving outcomes. So I'm wondering, as a leader of your caliber, having spent time, in those positions in your career, were there any themes that jumped out to you from that report, kind of looking at that, or looking at the interconnectedness of some of that data that really you saw as opportunities?
Absolutely, and the report is amazing, and I encourage anybody who hasn't looked at it yet to download it, take a look. It is chock full of data that we very carefully collected in partnership with our customers. It's very credible, it's very accurate, and I think it is very, very actionable, extremely useful for everybody. And it is certainly copious. We're very data-driven as a company here, something I've learned since joining the firm and something I truly appreciate. In terms of some of those lessons, I say first off, and this is foundational to our thinking about enterprise intelligence and about this whole space, is that knowledge has real business value. It is an asset of the firm. But most firms don't treat it that way. They kind of take it for granted. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, but if you take it for granted, it has very different, it's a different mindset, and it implies a different set of actions than if you treat it like a corporate asset, like any other kind of, like a financial asset or equipment you might have, et cetera. Two, people rely on too many disconnected sources. This theme of siloed knowledge is common. We hear it all the time, and we know, the knowledge that makes up a company's sort of total knowledge base may be in a bunch of different document repositories. It might be on intranet sites. It might be in databases for structured knowledge. Very likely, a lot of it is captured inside the data stores of specific vertical applications, like your CRM application, your ERP application, your customer service applications. They'll have their own little knowledge bases, not connected, not intersecting with each other. And so we hear that a lot. People turn around, they hunt around. And then, of course, the other big source of knowledge that we hear all the time is that a large portion of a company's knowledge base is really in employees' heads, or what's called in the industry tacit knowledge versus the explicit knowledge that's sort of in a system or in a database. And I think we've all had this experience. Your first instinct often, especially if you have trouble finding information through the systems easily, is to turn to a colleague and say, hey, how do I do this? Or what's the best way? Or who should I talk to? Or have you ever experienced this? And a lot of that knowledge forever sits in employees' heads. So, while it's anecdotally useful from those conversations, it doesn't get leverage, and it certainly doesn't get preserved as part of that corporate knowledge base. And so, we also see another pool of knowledge, so to speak, is in employees' heads, their know-how. The other thing, and I mentioned this briefly before, was this gap in awareness about the value of knowledge and the nature and scale of some of the challenges that companies face. Many of them are aware of it, or slightly aware of it, or coming to be aware of it over time. But frequently, they tell us they underestimate or have underestimated how much productivity is lost just searching for answers. And we've had this. Customers have told us, we had a customer tell us last week that an effort to find an answer that took dozens of people and hours of total time and weeks of elapsed time before they were using Bloomfire, the same kind of question took 6 minutes in one employee after. So it's a massive, massive gap. And because we all this is just what it takes, we're used to it. We don't realize until you take a step back. The other thing we found, doing this study for the report and in talking to a lot of customers along the way, and I've certainly heard it anecdotally as well, is that there's a huge belief or hope that AI is going to solve a lot of these problems by itself. And while AI is incredibly powerful, we certainly use it, a lot of folks use it and should, it is very, very powerful, useful tool. It is still only as effective as the data it sits on. It doesn't magically solve the data fragmentation, incompleteness, inaccuracies, the messiness of it.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect segue, because as you came on board first as a board member and then as CEO, I think you were able to look at not only the business but the market with fresh eyes, and that led to this concept that we've been talking about, which is called enterprise intelligence. So maybe for the uninitiated, what is that exactly, and how does that differ from what historically has been known as maybe a more traditional knowledge management approach?
Sure. And yes, this is the first thing I did while I was still a board member, not yet CEO. I spent some time really looking at this industry and just trying to bring the fresh eyes, as Dan said. I came in with familiarity and certainly having lived the realities of knowledge management in my own companies, but not having been a practitioner, so to speak, in the space. I was able to come in with just no preset assumptions. No, this is just how it is, and which is always a benefit when you go and do something new. So I wanted to take advantage of that while I still had it. And so I took a look at what we were doing, what others in the knowledge management space broadly were doing, and I started to think, well, what is this fundamentally? And I saw the sort of blurring of lines already between knowledge management and enterprise search. And those were two different things, but it was starting to get some overlap and seemed like it was getting a little messy in terms of the industry that could potentially be confusing for customers. Or like, well, what these things don't have much to do with each other. Why are they in the same industry segment, et cetera? And I started thinking, well, what are they trying to do? They're both trying to help customers answer questions of their own data, of their own knowledge. And the more I thought about it, I realized business intelligence, which I think traditionally has been thought of as quite different, is the same thing. These are just different sort of modalities of being able to interrogate a company's knowledge base to answer questions, to whether that's around a strategic decision making, whether that's around product innovation, whether that's around serving customers better. Many different use cases come out of that ability to interrogate your knowledge. But why these different things? So the more I thought about it, it's like, it's really kind of one thing, and it needs a new name. We came up with the term enterprise intelligence as being really probably the most descriptive way to kind of get our arms around it. And we define it as the much needed and natural convergence and evolution of knowledge management, enterprise search, and business intelligence. And because each of them were solving part of the problem, but not the whole thing. And we think there's a tremendous opportunity for us and for the industry to really start to think of these as one thing. And for practitioners or customers to think about the activities around those as much more cohesive and aligned. Business intelligence handles structured data, but not unstructured data. KM, knowledge management, stores data, but it's often quite passive. It's sort of organizing and managing the data, but doesn't necessarily surface insights. Search is great to retrieve, but it may not pass judgment on the accuracy. It just it gives you back a document that seems to fit what you're looking for. And so we think that by bringing these together, and of course being AI powered, using AI appropriately, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, I hope, we can actually surface the right insights. And so it sort of moves beyond this thinking about knowledge as these piles of data that are largely static, most definitely messy, and pretty fragmented, silos, and they kind of get added to, but not really cleaned up, or certainly not frequently cleaned up, and not connected with each other appropriately. And so we think about, well, what's that different way of doing that? And we call it knowledge orchestration. We say we're orchestrating knowledge from all these pools, including tacit information in people's heads, to try to capture that out in structured ways and turn it into explicit knowledge in the system so that it can be leveraged again and again and be preserved from loss, people leave. And by orchestrating the knowledge the right way and taking this dynamic, intelligent approach, not just a sort of passive, static approach, we can deliver much more powerful insights much more quickly and efficiently. And we think about it as delivering the right insight at the right time to the right person in the right context. And if you do that, you can unlock tremendous ROI.
Yeah. And maybe if I could pull that thread a little bit, and then we can jump into the AI a bit. I think it was literally day one of you being CEO. I asked you nicely to go to one of those more traditional KM conferences, right? And maybe unpack this enterprise intelligence thing, which is an evolution of AI. But there was a point in that conference, in the talk that you gave, I think, that stuck with not only me, but a lot of people, which is this idea of, look, ultimately knowledge really needs to find you. It's not the other way around. Maybe can you unpack, for those who were not so lucky to be in Phoenix for that conference, can you maybe unpack that for us on the call and kind of get deeper on what you meant by that?
Of course, happy to. And I really, Dan, it was a great pleasure to go to that conference and to, my first week in the CEO role, to drop right in and meet a whole lot of knowledge management professionals on the vendor side and, of course, on the customer side, and really absorb the way the industry thinks about things. And I enjoyed, and I gave my keynote address on enterprise intelligence, kind of really introducing this theme to the market. I've been very happy to see a number of people who heard me there now starting to use the term enterprise intelligence when they weren't previously. So that's, I think, a good signal that it is natural. It is kind of intuitive. To answer your specific question, all those systems I talked about, knowledge management, enterprise search, and business intelligence, are all reactive. You have to have an idea of a question that you're trying to answer, and you go to those systems and you search, or you look at a BI dashboard, or you hunt around, read a few documents, whatever it may be. There's a go and search, and hopefully the tools make it easy or easier to search, but you still have to know what you're looking for, and you have to go get it. And we think that while that's necessary, you have to be able to go and ask a question, and we always need to do that. We need to also, and we call that the reactive side. So the system is reacting to the user making a request. There also needs to be a proactive side. And I think in this, this time of agentic AI, we have more of a model to think about that. And so we think that a proper enterprise intelligence system needs to be proactive as well as reactive. And it needs to understand the people and, what is their role, what is their interest, what are they responsible for, and also understand the context of things. And, like what have I been searching for a particular question recently that seems relevant to what I do? And for the system to be able to pluck out interesting insights that are relevant to my role, to my interest, to my context, and feed those to me. And so basically, you can think about, I'm going to go out and search for the known unknowns, but I have no idea to even ask for the unknown unknowns. And but the system should be able to see, oh, here's an unknown that maybe Philip doesn't know about. Let me raise it. Let me surface it with context around it. So it's not out of the blue. It's like, here's something interesting that's happening. So the goal here is to, deliver proactively relevant knowledge and insights surrounded with context to the right person, right time, in the flow of work without even being asked. And we think that this can just add a huge amount more value. And just some examples. I might be looking at something on a customer or a competitor or part of the market, and if some new information surfaces, the system can say, hey, something has just been added to the knowledge base that's relevant. Or maybe, I asked a question last week and the system gave me an answer to my question, and then it could say, hey, actually the answer that I gave you, the system gave you last week, has evolved because of new information that's come in. Here's the new answer, here's what's changed, and here's why it changed, what caused it to change. So full transparency as well. And it just tells, otherwise I wouldn't know that the answer had changed unless I go and search again. So we think this is truly transformative. We like to think about bringing efficiency to our customers by helping them do things better, but we also want to help drive appropriate transformation where we help people do better things as well. Hopefully that answered your question, Ben.
No, I think we're leaning into some real world uses of, AI that feel repeatable and meaningful, and ways that are really going to empower the average employee to take advantage of AI in ways that, we both consider and say there's been a lot of promises made right over the last few years. And AI, some of them are, I think some of them are ringing true. Some of them maybe are a little bit, maybe don't feel as true as they did a few years ago. And maybe to that end, if we lean into the AI discussion a little bit, when we think about all that regarding kind of the management of knowledge, I'm not saying knowledge management is a science, but just the managing of knowledge when it comes to AI, like what kind of considerations do practitioners and IT leaders need to be thinking about in regards to AI when it comes to, hey, I'm going to use it to solve some of my knowledge problems?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Certainly very topical. And, I was at Google when OpenAI launched DALL-E and then ChatGPT kind of set the world and public perception on a certain course. And I think, to your point, AI that has been, probably continues to be hyped tremendously, and it's understandable. It's kind of a magical feeling thing. And but I think some of the expectations have not been met, despite continued advancement, evolution of the models, and obviously much more training and all kinds of things. And I think we've seen sort of generic AI tools in some areas, you can all read the news and see that some companies have struggled with the amount of adoption they expected. Not to say there's not adoption, but the level of expectation was really inflated versus where we are today. And there's a few reasons for that. I think despite these new generative models kind of feeling magical, certainly in the early days, they're not magic. It's technology. There's nothing magic about it. And it's important for all of us to understand these are tools. It's a tool. It allows you to do certain things much better, but you need to use the tool in an appropriate way, and not think, oh, I can just, it's magic. I can just throw it on top of here, or AI is my strategy. I think I like to think about a little bit nutty analogies, and I'll beg your forgiveness for this, but imagine you're a carpenter and you've been hand sawing wood, and now a circular saw comes along, electric. It's like, oh my gosh, I can cut wood so much faster. My productivity is high, and the cuts are cleaner. Like the quality and the quantity just skyrocketed. But that doesn't mean like, oh, my whole strategy as a carpenter is to use a circular saw, or I'm going to hammer in nails with a circular saw. Again, a nutty analogy, but to try to bring, forth, I think, the underlying reality of the situation, which is while AI is incredibly powerful, it's incredibly sophisticated, has many uses, it is a tool. It needs to be treated appropriately. It needs to be used for the right uses, appropriate uses, and it needs to be used in appropriate ways. Can't just use it for anything. Most importantly, fundamentally, is, and we've been saying for decades about computer systems, garbage in, garbage out. And nothing has changed. Computer systems, including AI, fall prey to garbage in, garbage out. They are AI systems, like our data processing systems or various analytics of the past, are all entirely dependent on the knowledge that goes in. So if the data going in is messy, it's fragmented, you've got conflicting things, you've got holes in it. Some of it's outdated and no longer pertinent or true, or you have things that are not really important, but they're kind of held up at the same level as something that is important. The AI will struggle to make sense of that. That is the case, and you may get very unreliable answers. If you put an LLM on top of, let's say, two documents, keep it simple, that conflict with each other, you are likely to get a random answer. That's just the nature of how these things work. So if you want the AI to work really, really well, you have to solve the garbage in problem. You have to make sure that it's not garbage going in, but it's beautiful knowledge that is clean, that is consistent, that is comprehensive, that's not conflicting, and that ideally doesn't have any holes in it or sort of incomplete areas. Then the AI can do what it's meant to do and what it's really, really good at doing. So if in a lot of firms, I've seen this, vendors promising, oh, just throw AI on top of your data mess and we'll solve your problems. Or companies saying, oh, we can just get an LLM and put it on top of this stuff and we're good to go. But if you don't take the time to clean up, heal, curate the knowledge base, it is not going to be reliable. And we've seen this. This is well known in AI circles, and we've seen it play out in practice. So, one of the key principles of benefits of the enterprise intelligence approach, the principle is that you need to have a self-healing knowledge base. That if you cannot allow your knowledge base to just be messy, you have to have tools and processes to make it clean and keep it clean. Then you are AI ready. And before you do that, you're not truly AI ready.
Yeah, no, I think that's really true. I mean, I think, it's you can put A1 sauce on a bad steak, it still makes it a bad steak, right? Like you're not improving the quality of that steak by putting A1 sauce on it. So I've eaten my share of bad steaks over the years. I don't want to do that if I don't have to. So we are on the cusp of kind of, I think, this revolution, right, when it comes to kind of seeing this new model around enterprise intelligence. That said, I think, we certainly have some, a great deal of customers who are, kind of doing things right, getting close to that. Maybe when you think about the real world impact, if I can embrace this enterprise intelligence model, if I can kind of start to think about what that real world impact's going to be, like, what in your mind are those first signs like that company is going to see when they start to embrace that model? What are the kind of early positive road signs they're going to see as they start that journey?
Yeah. It's a great question, and we do think about enterprise intelligence as having a long-term strategic benefit. We think if when properly embraced, it has these tremendous outcomes in terms of efficiency, in terms of innovation, in terms of competitiveness in the market. But to your point, Dan, we also see, and we've got hard-nosed data on this, and we have customers constantly measuring this themselves and giving us feedback. There is short-term actionable ROI that immediately can be captured. And we've had customers tell us that measurable dollars saved or earned in some way, as a multiple of what they spend on Bloomfire very quickly. So that's tremendous, and that's obviously what we strive for. In the short-term tactical level, you get an immediate hard-nosed ROI, while at the same time positioning yourself for sort of an uncapped long-term strategic ROI. Now, what's that short-term ROI look like? Well, productivity is an easy one, and I mentioned earlier about the customer that told us that dozens of people over weeks of calendar time, collaborating and trying to figure out the question, the answer to a question, replaced by one person in a few minutes being able to answer the same question. And by having a proper system and a proper organized knowledge base underneath it. So it's dramatic. It's orders of magnitude improvement by reducing the time spent searching or discussing or trying to figure out the answer. To fewer repeat questions. People will ask the same thing over and over again, particularly if it's tacit knowledge. Like an expert in some area will get hit with the same question. I'm sure all of you have experienced this at some time in your life, if not many times, where you just get asked the same question over and over and over again. And that takes, that's inefficient on the part of the questioner, and certainly very inefficient for the expert. That's taking you away from other things. Higher quality answers. So, if you have an answer that's sketchy or incorrect, it can lead to a mistake that has to be redone. That's a terrible, terrible hit to productivity, efficiency, and ultimately the bottom line. And so if you have better knowledge that's driving better decisions up front with fewer needs to redo, that's a huge win. And, and we think that, we've heard again from customers that they see this. These are real. This isn't just us, speculating about what the benefits might be. These people are living this and measuring it, and we're getting back hard-nosed data on these things. So we feel very good about those tactical value. And then, as I said, there is a long-term strategic value as well. And we see industry data about how cross-fertilizing knowledge and insight between different departments can lead to better outcomes. It leads to more innovation. It leads to faster decisions, the ability to respond to the market more quickly and with higher confidence, the ability to answer customer questions more completely and accurately. All of those, you're building a foundation for the future. And we think, and we certainly think the time is now for companies to really be thinking about that foundation and kind of what the next chapter is going to look like.
Yeah. No, I'll get to the last question, but before being Bloomfire CMO, I was a Bloomfire customer, right? And one of the things we saw after implementing it was the quality of the questions we got as a team improved, right? So, we were getting kind of a baseline quality of a question of X. And then once people had access to this information more readily, just the overarching quality, all boats rise kind of the questions went up. So totally understand that and got to live it in practice as well. So I'll finish up with this question, then we'll get a few from the audience. And so if you have any, encourage you to put them into the Q&A tool, and Emma will go through them. But last question would be, so certainly a compelling argument for kind of taking those first steps, but for folks who are listening, for folks who are watching, or for any company, what's really step one to kind of figuring out, like, do I have a knowledge problem? You probably do, let's be honest, but like how do you take that first step of understanding the knowledge problem, the extent of it, or even like, how do you take that first bite of the elephant, Philip? I mean, it feels somewhat overwhelming in some ways.
Oh yeah, it's a great question, Dan. Yeah, obviously there's a huge range in how messy of a knowledge problem companies may have over different companies. Some are really, very tight. Some are not so tight. And has a lot to do with the scale of the business as well. How much knowledge there is. If there's been a lot of acquisitions and different knowledge pools coming in over time, all of those can affect things. But the chances are, just statistically and looking at the data that we've looked at, the chances are that every company has at least some level of knowledge problem, and is probably worse than what they imagine it is, unless they've taken a very, very close look. Very few companies have done that. So like solving any problem, and nobody should treat this, it may feel overwhelming, but to your point, but no one should treat it as overwhelming. It's absolutely solvable. It's big, it's massive, it's very valuable, but it is absolutely solvable. And doing any hard thing, I believe the first step is always having the right mindset. And so our approach with enterprise intelligence starts with the mindset. And the mindset, which I mentioned, I think briefly earlier, is to think of your corporate knowledge as a company asset. Think of it as an asset. Think of it like it's a line item on your balance sheet. We actually believe it should be. And in the value of enterprise intelligence report we talked about earlier, we have an addendum for how to do that, literally how to think about putting knowledge on your financial statements. And thus, it's a key part of, we believe, of enterprise value. It should be, and should be treated that way. Once you start thinking about it as an asset, almost like capital in the bank, or again, like equipment, or other things, intangibles that you have, instead of taking it for granted, taking this knowledge for granted, you act differently. You say, this is an asset. I want to optimize this asset. I want to maximize this asset, and I want to protect this asset from getting lost. And I want to maximize the utility of the asset to the business. And that is critical. And that's why you want to start with this mindset, because as soon as you start thinking about it that way, your instincts are going to be aligned in the right way. If you take it for granted, you say, whatever, it's just there, it's a different deal. So first off, what are the steps? Get the mindset, treat your knowledge like a living asset and like a corporate asset, not just stored passive content that's kind of taken for granted. 2, you have to audit your current systems, obviously. You need to figure out, are people getting what they need? And a lot of this can be the use of the individuals, the users, your employees. Are they finding what they need? How long does it take? Are they getting good, solid answers? Are they frustrated with the systems and turning to their colleagues and relying on tribal knowledge, maybe more than they would like or should? Going through the content is a key part of this audit, and looking for redundant or outdated information, or where, if you can capture it, what are the questions that employees or customers, depending on the use cases you have, are asking where you don't have much content, where maybe it's kind of thin and you need to explicitly research and author some knowledge in that area, whether it's a standard operating procedure, or whether it's an insight research document, or what have you, or help, maybe some self-help documentation. Obviously, lots and lots of different things, and then and look for those gaps and fill them in as well. Look also kind of map the flow of knowledge. Where is it created? How are people thinking about how does it flow? Where does it bottleneck? We have a customer tell us recently that they are completely rethinking their documentation of standard operating procedures. Use us and use knowledge systems and currently use us to manage their standard operating procedure documents, which they've seen as these sort of passive docs. And now they're realizing the real value is in activating that knowledge. And it's causing them to go through a complete rethink of how they bring standard operating procedures to life for their employees, and not just simply a passive document, but can they inject it into the flow of work? And they're working with us on that. And then, of course, look for partners to help you identify the issues, clean up your knowledge base, figure out how to activate it in the right way. And that's obviously what Bloomfire is here to do. And hopefully you will turn to us and ask us for our help in this.
That's fantastic, Philip. Thank you. I'm going to go to the audience here and try to offer up a couple quick questions, because we're getting a little bit tighter on time. But I think one question that came through is along the lines of, just the challenge it is at organizations that that have loose central locations, right? And so if I've got, a ton of different business lines, a ton of geographic locations, a ton of different departments, right? Like, and I recognize that there's a knowledge problem. Like, any recommendations on how to start, Philip? So for example, have you seen success, either from, your history or thinking through from an enterprise intelligence positioning, like, in terms of, is there a department where it makes sense to start? Is there a location that makes sense to start? Any words of wisdom or counsel you could offer somebody in that situation?
So I think, breaking things down like anything, eat the elephant. I don't recommend actually eating elephants,
no,
for the record. To
use
that old analogy, you got to do it one bite at a time. And I think breaking problems down into tractable pieces, but doing it in a way that it is then extensible and scalable is critical. And focusing on, the processes, the approach, the mindset, and the approach you take, and then trying it out, learning lessons, updating based on those lessons, and then moving across the organization. I think, if you are, and so, wherever you have an urgent need, great, you can start there. But keep in mind that your goal is for everything to be connected. Ultimately, is one of the key principles of enterprise intelligence, is that all those different knowledge bases are connected and usable. Obviously, there's access rights, et cetera, and for good reasons, companies will want to control exactly what people see. But and Bloomfire obviously respects those completely stringently. But generally, if you take a mindset that you are going to try to be as open as you can be, and I've seen this at companies that I've worked at before, where they take an extremely open approach to things, and you're going to want to let information flow across departments, and you start with that mentality, it can be very, very helpful. So, if you're just like, I'm going to solve this problem for customer service, and we'll kind of do it here. But then if you haven't thought about how are we going to expose the insights and the information we're getting into customer service to the product development team, so they can use that to drive innovation. If you don't think about that up front, you may find you've really cleaned up this little island, and you haven't really optimized for expanding, for scaling across the organization. So that's also a key mindset to take.
Okay, very good. And I think the second piece of the question, and then we'll end, and I'll kick it over to Emma, is thinking about that in particular, perspectives on security, right? So obviously we're in a situation where security is the utmost importance. So how in an enterprise intelligence system, what's your perspective on, where you have interoperability right in between systems? Like, what's your perspective on, how to convince an organization around the importance of security, or that, the security will be accounted for within an enterprise intelligence system? That could be a potential sticking point among, those that are so inclined.
Absolutely. And I think so. And look, at Bloomfire, we take security. I take security, always have. And at Bloomfire, we do take it very, very seriously, and always have long before I got here. And, and we serve regulated industries. We have a number of financial services clients, a number of healthcare clients. In order to do that, you have to have top-notch security and privacy and regulatory compliance. And we have those things. And those are, just a bunch of tools. There's a bunch of processes you have to go through, and there's certain practices that you have to follow to do it the right way. And we're big believers in all of that. And obviously, we go through security audits all the time, particularly with our more security or compliance-oriented customers, and happy that we always pass with flying colors. It's good, keeps us on our toes, because the world evolves, and the cyber threat landscape, as well as the regulatory environment, are evolving all the time. We have to respond to those. You are correct, Dan, that there is a tension between openness, which is very empowering for the organization, and security, which obviously wants to prevent a disaster. So there's sort of the offense and defense, and security has traditionally sort of tried to clamp down on openness. It just tries to reduce what we call the threat, surface area. And I was the chief information security officer for a while at Google Workspace, it is, it's a hard tension. The thing is that, I think you can't just give up on openness in order to protect. You have to find other ways. And there are plenty of tools and practices that we follow, and I'm sure plenty of other vendors follow as well, that allow you to have safe connectivity between systems, safe openness, while still reducing the surface area for a threat vector to attack.
No, that's perfect. Thank you for that. Thank you, Philip. Thank you to all who tuned in. I'm going to turn it over to Emma to bring us home, but really appreciate it. Emma?
I think you may be on mute, Emma. Or the live stream is having a technical issue.
Yeah, maybe a technical issue. I think Emma was going to. I think Emma was going to remind us that you can download the reports from the platform itself, and I thoroughly encourage you to do it. As Philip said throughout our discussion today, just a fantastic bit of content for you to peruse through. Also encourage you, if you're so inclined, to reach out to us. Happy to take you through it. We've got experts who know it inside and out. But on behalf of Emma, on behalf of Philip and the Bloomfire team, we're just pleased you made time for us today, and hopefully this was helpful. We've got more planned throughout the year, so keep your eyes peeled for what's next, and hope everyone has a fantastic rest of your week, and everyone be well. Take care.
Oh, yeah. I want to add my own thanks there. I know we're over time, but I see in the inbox there are a bunch of questions. I see some old friends. Hi, George. It's great, and we'll try to get back to you. We'll take these. We're out of time. Sorry, a little loquacious on the other part, but we'll get back to you. And as Dan said, if you have any questions, please never hesitate to reach out. Obviously to Bloomfire, reach out to me. Happy to continue the discussion.
100%. Thank you all. Be well.
Take care.